Hi everybody, welcome to Module 4. This week we are going to talk about policies that affect specific subgroups of adults. These are subgroups of adults that are particularly relevant in today's political climate and that have policies associated with the particular group that are relevant in today's political climate. Aside from talking about those specific subgroups of adults and policies that affect them, we will also talk about how to write a talking points document this week. When we look at our Module 4 Canvas page, you can see that the subpopulations that we are going to talk about this week are individuals affected by power-based violence, and we will talk about the Violence Against Women Act for that. We will also talk about the immigrant population, and specifically talk about DACA, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. And then we will also talk about individuals who identify as LGBTQ, and then specifically talk about the same-sex marriage policy. So for this week, the materials that you will have to read and watch include, of course, this mini lecture, which you are working on right now. The PowerPoint that I will be using for this lecture is located right here. Also, you will read a document on VAWA, the Violence Against Women Act. You will read several documents regarding DACA, and then you will read 3 documents regarding same-sex marriage. In addition, you will read this example of a talking points document, and that's it for this week in terms of reading materials. Based on all of those materials, you will take a quiz. As usual, it has 10 questions, multiple choice, true, false. Same thing as usual as you've done in the previous 3 weeks. And then for the assignment for this particular module, you will again be creating a talking points document. And we will talk about that in more detail in the PowerPoint. So I'm going to pull our PowerPoint up. Just one moment. Okay, here we go. So again, this PowerPoint is going to focus on policies that affect specific subgroups of adults. And then it will also focus on how to write a talking points document. Again, the 3 specific groups of adults we're looking at are victims of power-based violence, immigrants, as well as individuals who identify as LGBTQ. So we will start, again, before I start with victims of power-based violence, the reason why I selected these 3 subpopulations is because they have really been in the spotlight, and they have really been affected by the current political climate. So it's important that we take a look at them a little bit more closely. The policies surrounding these subpopulations have really been in flux in the recent political climate, really since the Trump administration and slightly before that. And so it's important that we stay abreast of these policies that are in flux all the time. So the first one, again, is the Violence Against Women Act. The next one is Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. And then the last one we'll look at is same-sex marriage policy. So again, let's start with victims of power-based violence. When we think about power-based violence, there are a variety of different acts that we could be talking about. And that could also include, for instance, bullying and cyberbullying. That's not really what we're talking about here. When it comes to this subpopulation and power-based violence within the context of this class, really I'm looking at sexual assault, intimate partner violence, or dating violence, and stalking. So sexual harassment, sexual assault, when we think about the statistics on sexual assault, it really is a very prevalent, scarily prevalent incident. So 1/5 of women and 1 in 71 men will be raped at some point in their lifetime. So especially when you think about the number there for women, 1 in 5 women, that's a lot of women that are experiencing rape at some point in their life. When you look at other types of sexual violence other than rape, 46.4% of lesbian women, 74.9% of bisexual women, and 43.3% of heterosexual women report having experienced some type of sexual violence other than rape in their lifetime. So that's almost half, and for bisexual women, 3/4 of women who have experienced some form of sexual violence other than rape. Among men, we see also very high rates among gay men, 40.2%, among bisexual men, 47.4%, and then among heterosexual men, 20.8% reported experiencing sexual violence other than rape during their lifetime. So again, sexual violence is very common. It's certainly something that we need to do something about. And as you can see, even though sexual assault is often perceived as a women's issue, it really does occur among men as well. It is more common among women, but certainly it's common among men as well. Then when we look at intimate partner violence, so 1/3 of women and 1/4 of men have been physically abused by an intimate partner. Again, those numbers are staggering. Let that set in for a minute. 1/3 of women and 1/4 of men. If you think about our class, we have about 12 students in our class. Approximately 1/3 of the people in this class have experienced intimate partner violence, which means that about 4 people in this classroom have an experience with this. 1 in 5 women and 1 in 7 men have been severely physically abused by an intimate partner. Intimate partner violence is most common among women between the ages of 18 and 24, so that's college-age women, essentially. Then when we talk about stalking, 1 in 7 women and 1 in 18 men have been stalked. Stalking can cause the target a great deal of fear that person is going to be harmed or potentially killed even. So these statistics really show that power-based violence is very common, and that it is critically important that we have policies in place that help to eradicate these problems, or at least reduce these staggering numbers. The policy we're going to look at in regards to power-based violence is the Violence Against Women Act, also known as VAWA. So the reason why I also went with VAWA is because power-based personal violence has been highlighted in the media quite a bit in recent years. You may recall the Me Too campaign, which really allowed a lot of people to feel comfortable coming forward telling their stories with sexual assault, with sexual harassment, with stalking, etc. The Violence Against Women Act was passed in 1994 under the leadership of then Senator Joe Biden, who of course we now know is going to be running for president, in the primaries at least. So again, VAWA was passed in 1994 under leadership of Joe Biden. This federal legislation is very comprehensive. It combines provisions on offender accountability as well as programs to provide services for victims of such violence. So it really is looking at both ends of the problem. It's looking at how do we provide services for victims, but at the same time it's also looking at how do we make sure that offenders are being held accountable. So it is a very, very comprehensive policy. Okay, so then let's move on and talk a little bit about the immigrant population. So the immigrant population in the United States has grown substantially, even in the last few years. When we look at, for instance, data from 2014, we can see that the U.S. immigrant population and their U.S.-born children equals about 42.4 million individuals, which is 13.3% of the total U.S. population. Again, that was in 2014. When we look at 2016, so just 2 years later, the U.S. immigrant population and their U.S.-born children equaled 81 million. So that's 26% of the total U.S. population. So it just about doubled. That is a striking number. And given the fact that we do have such a large immigrant population, and certainly that is only going to increase, it is very, very important that we acknowledge that and that we have policies in place to ensure that this population can be healthy and successful and happy. The policy that I'd like to focus on with regards to the immigrant population is DACA. So DACA stands for Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. The reason why I really want to focus on this policy is because it has been in the spotlight. It continues to be in the spotlight under the Trump administration. Trump has been, and his administration have been making very concerted efforts to eliminate this policy. So it's important for us to keep an eye out for it. DACA is an immigration policy that was implemented under President Obama. It allows people who were brought to the U.S. illegally as children before they were 16 years old to request consideration of deferred action for a period of 2 years. And then that's subject to renewal. After 2 years, they can apply for renewal. So that means that they can request to defer deportation for 2 years. After those 2 years are up, then the program participants can request DACA renewal for an additional 2 years and so forth. Immigrants who qualify for DACA receive a work permit so that they can work legally in our country. So that's very important. So again, DACA is for anybody who was brought to the United States illegally when they were a child, so under the age of 16. If they were brought here illegally under the age of 16, they can then request to defer deportation for 2 years, and during that time span, they will get a work permit that allows them to work legally in our country, and after those 2 years are up, they can apply for renewal of their DACA. An estimated about 1.3 million people meet the criteria for DACA in the United States. Only about 682,000 of those individuals are actually participating in DACA. So that means that as of 2017, there was a program participation rate of about 52%. So about half of the eligible people are participating. The current status of DACA is such that the Trump administration has halted any new applications for DACA. So individuals who have not previously had DACA cannot get it right now. You cannot apply for DACA if you haven't had it before. At this point, though, people who have had DACA now, who have it now, or have had it in the past, may still apply for renewal. We don't know how long that will last. Certainly, the Trump administration is trying to put a stop to that as well. But at this current point, individuals are still able to apply for renewal. You cannot apply for a new application for DACA at this point. So again, DACA is a very important policy to keep your eye on. Then the last population that I want to talk about is the LGBTQ population. LGBTQ, of course, stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and questioning. Approximately, and my face is in the way, so let me move it for a second. So approximately 9 million people in the United States identify as LGBT. It's estimated that at least 3.5% of the American population identify as lesbian, gay, or bisexual, and about 0.3% are transgender. Now, when it comes to the LGBT or LGB population, that 3.5% is really the low end of the estimation. There are other data points that I've seen that estimate the population to be more around 15% or even 20%. So again, at least 3.5% of the American population identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual, but it certainly could be significantly more than that. And I believe that the majority of estimates I've seen, I feel confident saying that it's more likely to be somewhere between 10 and 15%. The LGBTQ community has suffered a tremendous amount of discrimination in this country and continues to suffer discrimination in this country. Some of that discrimination is more hidden and other discrimination is very blatant. The Stonewall Uprising is really the event that was the impetus for our modern day LGBT civil rights movement. The Stonewall Uprising, if you haven't heard of this before, I recommend that you Google it, that you look it up on YouTube to watch some video of it. It refers to an incident that occurred in 1969 where the police raided the Stonewall Inn. The Stonewall Inn was a very popular bar in New York City that was frequented by the gay community. And the police decided to raid the Stonewall Inn, and that resulted in riots that lasted several days. And those riots were really the very beginning of the LGBT civil rights movement in our country. So it was a very important moment in time. And since that time, and even before that, of course, there has been a continued fight and battle to improve the rights and well-being of the LGBTQ population in our country. There have been, since 1969, despite the fact that there definitely still is discrimination going on, it's important that we're all aware of that, but there have also been some really phenomenal political victories in recent years, with same-sex marriage bans being found unconstitutional by the Supreme Court. So that happened in 2015. There was a Supreme Court ruling. It was not unanimous, far from it. It was a 5-4 ruling, so 5 of the Supreme Court justices were in favor and 4 were opposed, but it was enough to pass, which was huge. And their decision made it so that states could no longer ban same-sex marriage, thereby making same-sex marriage legal across the United States, regardless of what state you live in. So same-sex marriage became legal in all states starting in 2015 with that Supreme Court decision. Again, not unanimous. It was a 5-4 split vote, but enough to pass this same-sex marriage ban, which was a tremendous victory. In 2015, the Gallup estimated that about 780,000 Americans are in same-sex marriages, and another 2 million live with a same-sex domestic partner. We obviously fully expect that those numbers are going to be on the rise now that same-sex marriage is legal across the United States. Given the major policy changes that have occurred over the past 5 years, it's really important for us to be aware of these policies, and that's why I'm asking you to read some articles and documents related to this policy. Okay, so those are the main populations and policies that I would like for you to become more familiar with. Again, looking at VAWA, looking at DACA, and then looking at same-sex marriage policy. Aside from these policies, what I would like for you to examine this week is talking points documents. So again, in order to engage in class advocacy, one of the tools that it can be very helpful to know how to use is a talking points document. So what talking points essentially are, you can liken them to like Cliff Notes. So they are a document that you create that is very brief, again, just one page, just like all the other advocacy tools we are looking at. And in those talking points, you outline the main points that you want to make when you're engaging in policy advocacy. And you create this document really with the intent to share it with fellow advocates. So your audience is other individuals who are going to be advocating alongside of you, because you want to make sure that you and all the people that are going to be advocating next to you, that you all have the same message. You all have the same facts. You're armed with the same materials so that you can make the best case possible in order to bring about policy change. So these talking points, again, they're intended for other advocates who are trying to advocate for the same change you are. You would distribute this talking points document to them so that they have the same facts and knowledge that you have as they move forward in advocating for change. And that might be, you might share your talking points document. Let's say you are working at a nonprofit agency and several employees of that agency are all going to Frankfurt to advocate for change. In that case, you could create this talking points document, share it with your colleagues, and that way all of you have the same information, the same facts as you head to Frankfurt. So again, very brief, one page. The reason for that, again, is because you want to make this content easy to digest. You don't want it to be super long because people will get lost in that document then, and that's the last thing you want. On this next slide, I have an example of a fact sheet. An example of talking points. This example came out of the Lobby Day. This is the Lobby Day 2001 Talking Points on the Clinical Social Work Medicare Equity Act of 2001. So this is a talking points document that was created by NASW. And you can see the outline that they use, and this is the outline that I want you to use as well when you create your talking points document. So you will use this exact same format for your assignment. Whoops, clicked too soon. You will use the exact same format for your assignment. So you start with presenting the background facts, then you identify the issue or the social problem, Then you explain how that problem was created, and then you propose a remedy. So this is the outline you will use, and you will use these subheadings just as they appear here. Those are the same headings you will use when you write this assignment. And certainly I've included this outline, these subheadings, within the assignment itself so that you can see them there too. So again, these talking points here, this example, pertain to Clinical Social Work Medicare Equity Act. They give the background facts, then they talk about the issue, the social problem, then they talk about how that problem was created, and then they finish by proposing a remedy. So how do we fix this problem? Again, what this allows is if you share this with other advocates, then everybody has the same background facts. They know exactly what the issue is, they know how the problem was created, and they know how to solve that problem. And everybody is then armed with the same materials as they move forward to advocate for change. Then what I'd like to end with for this mini lecture is to just give you an overview of what you will have to do for this module, again, just to make sure that we are all on the same page. So you will watch this lecture, which you're doing right now, and then you will read the supplemental materials regarding VAWA, regarding DACA, and same-sex marriage policy, and then you'll also read the advocacy tools materials related to talking points. After you have consumed all these materials, then you can move on to complete the assignments for this week. These assignments are the quiz, of course, which is 10 questions, multiple choice, true, false, as usual. And then for your written assignment for this week, you will create the talking points document, again using the exact same outline that was used on the slide prior to this one. If you have any questions at all this week, please don't hesitate to email me. I'd be happy to communicate through email or in person or over the phone, whatever is best for you. Have a wonderful week, and I will be in touch next week with, gosh, next week will be our last week already. So we're almost there. We're well over halfway. Have a great week. Bye, everybody.